Good afternoon and welcome to the College of Continuing and Professional Studies webinar, Allyship in the Workplace. Thank you so much for joining us today. Next slide, please. It's a pleasure to have you all here this afternoon. My name is Shanta Belai, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. If you have future questions about this webinar or other programs we offer, the college's contact information will be on the last slide of this presentation. I'm delighted to introduce the topic for today's webinar, Allyship in the Workplace. In our current climate, allyship is essential in creating an inclusive workforce. Research shows a correlation between an inclusive workplace where all feel they belong and contribute, and greater employee engagement and retention. Join us and learn how to best create an environment where we can all benefit from the power of allyship. Key takeaways will include broadening your understanding of allyship, integrating new practices for strengthening allyship, magnifying good practices and diminishing challenging ones, and lastly, creating next steps to put allyship into action. It's a pleasure to introduce the presenter for today's webinar, Patricia Izek. Patricia, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your wisdom on the topic. I will pass it over to you.
Thank you, Shanta, and welcome everyone. As you can see, my slide says exactly that. Bienvenidos, bienvenue, welcome, and in all the languages I could find. And please, if you have others, send them my way. I hope that you will feel welcome during this webinar with us here today. We're going to be together for approximately just shy of an hour now. Be thinking of questions, send them, put them in chat. Shanta will help me at the end to get to as many as I possibly can. But with that, I will move us to the next slide, which is a land acknowledgement, something I feel that is very, very important to do. And I will read it for everyone. We acknowledge that the University of Minnesota Twin Cities is built within the traditional homelands of the Dakota people. It is important to acknowledge the peoples on whose land we live, learn, and work, as we seek to improve and strengthen our relations with our tribal nations. We also acknowledge that words are not enough. We must ensure that our institution provides support, resources, and programs that increase access to all aspects of higher education for our American Indian students, staff, faculty, and community members. So thank you for that and allowing me to read that to you. I think it's a very important part of our community here at the university. And it's work that we all need to strive to be better at. So our agenda for today is, of course, my welcome, my land acknowledgement. I'm going to share with you who am I. And then after that, we're going to talk a little bit about the workplace of today. We need to understand privilege because that is at the base of being a good ally. If you don't understand how privilege plays into this, you're missing a big component of it. Then how our curiosity is so tied to allyship, and how you can start being an ally with just one act. That's what it takes, just one. The importance of an apology in being an ally, how you can continue to learn. We're going to talk about the resistance that you may face as an ally. And then I'm going to do a brief little look at from the presidency of Obama to all of a sudden no affirmative action in higher education and what that will mean, not only in higher education, but also how it will trickle into our workforce. And of course, leave time for questions. I may not always have answers for you, but my email will be provided to you, so you can always reach out to me as well. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. All right, so who am I? So I am Patricia Izek, of course. I use she, yes pronouns, and presently I am the Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility at the University of Minnesota Libraries, a position I have held since January. Prior to that, I was the EDI consultant, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion consultant in the Office of Human Resources. So I am just thrilled to be with you here. And furthermore, I am a first-generation Mexican-American. I am the daughter of immigrant parents who immigrated to the United States in 1950 separately. They both landed in Chicago, met, and here I am. I was born and raised in Chicago. I grew up in a working class, lower income neighborhood. I attended parochial schools because our neighborhood public schools just fell even to my parents, who my dad only went to 4th grade and my mom never went formally to school. But they knew that the local schools just weren't up to par. So whatever they had, they managed to send all 4 of us. I had 2 older brothers and a younger sister to parochial schools. Spanish was my first language, which means that I am bilingual and bicultural. I lived in a world where I literally was a Mexican inside my home and with family members and everyone else. But as soon as I walked out the door, I lived a very American lifestyle and spoke English and everything else that goes along with that. So bilingual, bicultural. I am able-bodied today because I also am very aware of the fact that tomorrow I may not be. And that is something that has really made me realize the importance of not only championing diversity, equity, inclusion, but also accessibility. I have no visible disabilities nor needs. And I hope we meet your needs and that you, if you need the captioning, that you go right ahead and select captioning for yourself. I am cisgendered. I am college educated with a master's degree. I am the product, of all who came before me with their dreams and aspirations. I did not get to where I am today on my own, and I really firmly acknowledge those who made it easier for me to get to where I am. I wear glasses. I'm wearing my white frame ones today. And once again, I am thrilled to be here with you. So let's get going. And if we were in person, I would have you do something very similar. So maybe it's a good thing it's a webinar, right? All right, here we go. So this is the framework I use when I talk about allyship. This comes from Better Allies, and I highly encourage you, betterallies.com. It's right there. It is an amazing site to go to, books. If you sign up for their newsletter, they will send you a weekly Friday newsletter that will give you a few tips on how to improve your allyship. But it's a journey being an ally. It's not something that just happens naturally to most of us. I think it is a commitment that we make, and it's great if you can say it out loud to yourself and say, I am going to be an ally today, and wherever I can find that opportunity for myself. So the first thing that you have to do is you have to understand your privilege. And we're going to go into depth on a little bit on all of these. The second is that you have to be willing to be curious and find that curious bone in your body that's going to make you want to learn more. You're going to have to start and be courageous and just step into it and start with a single act. And you have to be okay with making mistakes. And that means that you have to learn how to apologize, really apologize. And then the commitment to keep learning, because none of this is static. It just doesn't stay. You've done it. We're done. I'm an ally. It continually changes. And that's why it's so important for us. And welcome back to any of you who have heard me speak to this topic before, but I encourage you to not, because you've taken this webinar with me today, that you say you're finished. I encourage you to, when you see the topic come up again, to join in on another webinar or a course or whatever it is that's available to you. All right, so let's get started on this journey. Let's see how it is that we can unleash this power of allyship. So the workplace today, I want to talk a little bit about this because it really has drastically changed since COVID for the majority of us, not everyone, but for many, many of us. Work could be any place now, right? I am the proud parent of 3 20-something-year-olds, all college grads, all working. Well, one's on strike right now. He's a writer in Los Angeles, so yes, he can. But it could be anywhere, literally. I could be home right now, working from home, or I'm right here in the office on campus on the West Bank at the University of Minnesota, and I have no idea where you're coming to us from. But that's something that really we have to realize, that our possibility for being an ally has really reached a new network, right? Because we appear in these rectangles on a more frequent basis, being an ally may be being an ally in this arena of Zoom. It could be in person, of course, right? There are many of us who still have to come into the office and work. Many in the library system have returned to work full time because what they do is better accomplished with them physically in the office, and that's just part of the role. It could be, again, virtual. It could be in any environment. It could be an office environment. It could be manufacturing, healthcare setting, which is a whole nother world in and of itself, commercial, right, providing services, etc. It could be any classification as well. You could be at the professional level, labor, trade, teacher, healthcare provider, etc. You could be full-time, part-time, seasonal. And all of these, once again, I just want to stress, they could all be a hybrid version of them. And I hope that should you find yourself looking for a position or anything of that nature, that the positions are being described to seekers for what they are. If they are in person, then they should be said clearly on the job posting, this is an in-person position. If it is hybrid and is temporarily hybrid, it should also say this position is hybrid at the moment and will be reassessed in 6 months or whatever it is. But I think that transparency is very important for us so that we know how to show up at work. And the reason why showing up at work is so important to allyship because when you show up at work, you may need allies. So all of this is okay. So moving on, privilege. Very important for us to understand our privilege. And I described it basically, very simply, right, as who you are, right? What you have and enjoy and you're able to do it. Meaning little effort was put into it. You may think that there was, but the reality of it is it's privilege. Peggy McIntosh, Dr. McIntosh, and her work, which started with this in her essay in 1988, White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack, helped folks understand white privilege because she brought it to a personal level for individuals. And with 26 examples for folks to consider. And I have the essay there for you to take a look at it when you have an opportunity. It's really a strong essay, and I think it's really important just to take a look at the different elements to it. Southern Poverty Law, Learning for Justice also has a wonderful section on privilege, which again, I encourage you when you have the time to go through this. And I know that this PowerPoint will be shared with you if it hasn't already, so please do access those. But the other thing is, well, and I'll go to you in just a second, a little bit more on white privilege, right? There's white and there's privilege. White, most who are white have never described themselves as white. It's only very recently that this has come into more of our world, right? Unfortunately, it was due to the murder of George Floyd, which really just unleashed the realization of the inequities that exist and continue to exist. But it made people realize that white is the default, right? I remember just myself growing up being asked, what are you? I grew up in Chicago, so people are very blunt and to the point. And I knew exactly what they meant. And I would say, I'm a Mexican American, because I knew exactly. But if I were to ask them what they are, they'd say, I'm American. Right? Their response was always, I'm American, because I was never asked, what was I by someone non-white? Very, very rare. So for them, it was okay to say they were an American. But to me, if I responded, I'm an American, they said, no, we're from. So you see, there's this concept, it's a privilege to be born white in this country because it's the default for, you don't need to say or mention it. And now, though, I think we've come to this realization where now we realize it. And more people are they own it and do it beautifully and just say, I'm a white middle-class individual, grew up and, are very willing to share more about themselves. Privilege, no one wants to think of themselves as being privileged. We all want to believe that we're hard workers, that we get to where we are, right? We all work hard. Everyone works hard. We pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, right? And I'm sure you've already heard that not everybody gets bootstraps. We joke growing up, we had chanclas, and chanclas are slippers, like those swim thing, little plastic ones. And so it's important for us to realize that this is still very true for many. Yes, things are getting better, but not as fast as we would like them to. So we all earn what we have is this concept, right? But in reality, many of us start so far back that when we just have to earn to get to where others are starting from. So it's important for us to understand and be comfortable word with using the concept of privilege. Okay, so here we are, 50 potential privileges that you may be aware of in the workplace. So I think this is important. And I want you to just go ahead and take a look at these on your own. But these are the ones that occur in the workplace, right? White, you're male, you're straight, you're cisgender, but English is your first language. Just think of the convenience of that, right? And what that can look like. You're not the primary caregiver for anyone else, number 14. Just think of how many of your coworkers may be doing that, right? So I think it's important to understand that as well. So very important. At events, number 31, people don't mistake you for a member of the catering staff. That has happened too. Okay, so all of these things will help you to understand what we mean when we say privilege. So it is not something that we want people to feel bad about. We want people to recognize it. That's basically it. It's the recognition of it. Okay, thank you. And this is also available to you. So know your privilege. Do not get defensive. And I know that that is often the first go-to for individuals. It's like, no, I'm not privileged. I come from a very hardworking, and then it continues. But it's like, just to take a breath, and just to acknowledge, well, you're right. As a white person, I have had opportunities that others may have been denied. But I also come from a low income working class, or I also am a first generation. See, so that now makes a very difference, because the individuals, now you've entered the conversation that you do understand the concept of privilege, and that you understand that although you entered ahead of the game on some levels, there were also some barriers that were presented to you as well. Okay, that helps you to be a better ally. And that's what we're talking about now, is how to be a better ally. The other thing is to listen to learn. It's really hard to be an ally if what you're listening for is how to negate. So I'm hoping that you're here today, along with the rest of us, to learn, to listen, right? To just listen and to maybe think, that's a different way of thinking about it. Okay. I'll have to give that some more thought. You don't have to agree, but it's just to listen to learn. Help others to learn, right? If you hear someone make a comment, and if it's a situation where it's appropriate for you to comment as well, you can redirect or just say, oh, I think what they meant, right? And help them to understand what has been said. Sometimes it's not the right time to do it, and I completely understand that. But it can be approached at a later date, okay? Really what we want is for you not to be a bystander, not to just be there, to take it in, to listen, to learn, to observe, and to know when it's appropriate for you to act, to do something, okay? And that's what we're going to talk about now. And this is a courageous thing to do. And again, I repeat, there are going to be times when the act is not going to happen immediately. The do something will not happen immediately, because it has to be assessed. You have to think about how to do it. This individual may be a supervisor. This individual may be the one that will determine whether you get a raise or not get a raise. This individual may hold some other power over you that makes it an imbalance for you to approach. Hopefully, what you can do is find an ally that can help you approach the situation. So, it's easy for me to say, don't be a bystander, act, do something. But I am very aware of the fact that it's not always the right time to do that. Okay? So what else do you need besides that courage to do something? Well, you need to be curious. And curiosity is very tied in with being a good ally. Catalyst, which is workplaces that work for women, it's been around, a thought leader since 1962, a global nonprofit supported by many of the world's most powerful CEOs and leading companies to help build workplaces that work for women. And we all know that if you help women, we help all. So I think that's important to acknowledge as well. Allyship means actively supporting people from marginalized groups, using institutional, social, and/or cultural privilege or power as you have to advocate for people who face oppression. So catalysts for allies for them are amplify unheard voices, voices that don't have an opportunity to be heard. Call out barriers and biases that can inhibit progress, because that's what they do. They keep us from being our best. And I think that's really important for us to acknowledge. These biases that exist and these barriers, they really hurt all of us in the long run. If we had all been educated equitably, wow, right? Wow. But education hasn't been equitable. Education has been based on home ownership. And boy, you can go down that and figure out who was allowed to be a homeowner. So of course, we have pockets of individuals who have not been well educated. Absolutely. You know, so it is through incredible barriers that we have had to pass through in order to reach that. So we need to call out those barriers and those biases that can inhibit the progress. Act as role models in their commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I would add accessibility here. But these are their words. So I just wanted to share this with you. So they acknowledge that curiosity is a very, very important part of this work as well. So it's about proactively seeking out different points of view. So as soon as you hear one thing, ask yourself, why is it that that is being said, right? And it's that curiosity that will then lead you to wanting to listen, right, to others and each other, and to learning, because it is through that curiosity, that question, why was that said? I wonder why they did that. That then you will enter into this realm. Reflecting on what you've heard and what you've even said is really important to be an ally, because we have to hear what's going on and to be able to assess what else is going on that has given root to this is very important for us as we move through allyship, our journey of allyship. People who are curious are open to new perspectives. And basically, that's what we want. We want individuals to always be open. I make it a point to listen to others whom I don't agree with. But because I don't agree with them does not mean that I cannot listen to them. I may, in the end, after listening to them, still not agree with them. But I hope that I am able to engage in some sort of conversation as long as they are also curious, want to listen, want to learn, and reflect on what I say and what they say. So it takes both sides to want to do this in order for us to begin to listen to each other. So it's very important in allyship for us to do this. So you want to be open to new perspectives, again, welcome respectful exchange of ideas, and channel their learning into action. So it's through this learning process that then you can develop how it is that you will act as an ally, because it's not just jumping in. Sometimes the individual that has been, let's just say, wronged, for lack of a better term right now, may not want you to intervene there. So it's really important for us as an ally to understand what they would like. So often, you know, when I hear something, if it's appropriate or I think I understand what's going on, I may to say something at that moment, do something at that moment. But if I am unsure, I will approach the individual and I will say, you know, I heard what was said. It made me feel uncomfortable. And I would like to know how you would like me to be able to be an ally in a situation like that for you. You know, that because you're acknowledging, you're saying you heard it, you understood the inequity in it, and you are more than willing to step in, but you would like to know how they would like you to step in. You know, and that goes back to the saying, right? Nothing about me without you is for me. So it's really important for you to understand how they would like you to intervene. So sometimes this do something, act, right, is slowed down because there's much for us as allies to understand. But it is important for us. And the only way this all happens is if we're curious enough to truly listen, to learn as we're listening, and to be willing to enter a space of conversation. Okay? Recognize as each of us is exposed to just a fraction of the world, a fraction. And that we value the insights that diversity and difference bring. Okay. So where do we start, right? Where do we start? And again, it's that listening, but something that I think most of you heard, I introduced myself with my pronouns. And I think that's a good place to start. And also recognize that when you refer to me or someone else that with pronouns, you may make a mistake, and that's acceptable. Mistakes are acceptable. And we'll talk about apologies in just a little bit, but that's one thing that you can do. And that takes time, and it's hard to remember. I often forget still. So it takes time because you're asking yourself to do something in a different way that you are comfortable already doing, right? So now you are challenging yourself and your norm. The language that we use, right? Are we using the right words? And I know that people often say, oh my goodness, we can't say anything anymore. Well, I would beg to differ. I think the capacity for language is incredible. And that our language, the English language, my other language, the Spanish language, and so many other languages are rich and full of wonderful words that can be used that would not be viewed as detrimental to someone else. So I think it requires a little bit more from us because we are so used to being able to say whatever we want, however we want. But if you think of the impact that some of these words may have on others, I think it's important for us to really give this some thought. Give the language that we use, the language we choose, some thought. And to focus on accessibility, right? Here at the libraries, this is one of the things that really called to me to apply for this position here at the university, is that their director of DEI also was the person who was going to be looking at accessibility. By no means do I consider myself an expert in this arena, but I do know the importance of accessibility. Our students today require different forms of accessibility that we are not ready wholly to meet yet, but that we do the best we can and to try and meet them where they're at. We have a wonderful disability resource center here that assists not only our students, but our faculty and staff. And I think it's really important for us to do the best that we can to make these PowerPoints, to make our documents and our PDFs and everything else, our web pages, our websites, our newsletters, everything that we do as accessible as possible. Because it truly goes back to that point that when you make it good for one, you make it good for all. So I think it's important for us to remember that. So if you keep accessibility at the forefront, you really are helping everyone. So focusing on accessibility is truly allyship. To say their name, and by there, I mean whoever it is who has been marginalized. And that marginalization occurs for many, many reasons. It's not only ethnicity, it's class, it's size, it's gender identity. It's so many, it's so many of these things. So it's important for us to see who is being left out and to take note of it. And then to somehow, some way, say their name, mention them, kept something that they've done that was really great, or just doing right. It's important. That's allyship. Bring someone not usually included to a meeting, right? And maybe take turns bringing someone to a meeting. People often don't even know that they would like to be in a different position until they're exposed to what that position could look like for them. So this is something, it's a very informal way of offering a mentorship, right? It doesn't have to be an official, full-blown mentorship or meeting with someone on a regular basis, although I would encourage that as well. But this is something where you can and just let someone know, hey, I sit on this committee and I'm not sure you'd be interested in it, but I would love to invite you to one of our meetings, and you could just sit and observe and just let me know if you're interested. And the next time that we're looking for new committee members, I can let you know. But it's a great way to just introduce someone to other people as well. So put that on your list. Praise their work. And here again, there, meaning anybody who you see that's on the margins often. And we all have seen this, where the individual who may say something, come up with the idea or whatever it is, and then it's not even listened to or heard, but it is, because someone else will say it, repeat it almost identically, and they will get the praise. So it's important for us as allies to step in and say, oh, and I'll just pick a name here. My brother's name is Joe, so I'll pick on Joe. And say, Joe, that's a great idea. In fact, my other brother's name is Ed. Ed just said that, and I think that is excellent, Ed, and give it the credit back to the original person, right? That's allyship, and that's something that you can do in the moment. So to praise their work. Be transparent with hiring processes. I think this is so important. And I've already spoken to it a little bit, right? If the position is going to be a hybrid position, or if it's an in-office position, whichever way it is, but to really be transparent about salary ranges, be transparent of the reporting structure, be transparent of the work that's going to be expected of you to do, and truly be transparent of the skills that are needed for you to bring into the job. Why? So you can succeed. It doesn't do anyone any good to be coming into a position where the transparency has not been there, and then all of a sudden expectations are put on you where you are set for failure. So it's very important, and a great question, if you happen to be looking for a position, to ask that question, right? Are all these skills the skills that you really feel will be the ones a successful candidate needs to bring in? And then follow up saying that you feel you are that candidate, of course, right? But transparency in the hiring process. But that's just in the job posting. Let's talk about more of the hiring process, right? Transparency in the onboarding. What to expect, right? As you now have entered this, what truly are the benefits that apply to you? Does this place, this new company, this institution, wherever it is, are there affinity groups, ERG groups, employee resource groups, business resource groups that you can join that would be open to you? And if there are, please, to make sure that the individual is allowed to participate. At what point would you be up for a mentorship or the next level of assignments? I think all of that being transparent at the beginning during the onboarding really communicates to an individual that you are more than happy that they are here and that you see them staying. Okay. Rephrase compliments. This is true allyship here. Your presentation set a new standard. You nailed that concept. Thanks. Right? As opposed to saying to someone, you are so articulate. Because what's saying, of course, who would not be presenting the expectation for that individual to be articulate would be an expectation. So to tell someone that they've meet the expectation is not really a compliment. A compliment is this: they've set a new standard. A compliment is they nailed the concept. So rethink that. Often we think we're giving someone a compliment. Boy, I'm going to be really good here. And the reality is that we don't meet that. So think about what it is that you want to say, give it some thought, and then, think of ways to say it where it truly is going to be a compliment to the individual. So I promised we would look at an apology, right? Because apologies are very important. As an ally, I guarantee you're going to make mistakes. And the best thing you can do is acknowledge you've made it. Sorry, I think what I just said may have been offensive. I'll do better. I have more learning to do. That's it. Or you misgender someone. Sorry, I meant to say they. That both of those are examples of enough of an apology. You can change how we move forward, right? That's what it is. You say sorry, and then it's about moving forward. Say it authentically and with the intent to improve. Do not add the but, because but is going to negate the apology, right? Because by saying but, you're offering an excuse that you want them to accept. Don't say but. Sorry, period, is enough, with a commitment to do better as you move forward. And it's a journey, right? We don't expect, and I even shared, I make mistakes frequently, not all the time, but frequently. You may make the same mistake again. Take note and commit not to make it again. I have gotten better, especially when I make the same mistake. I say, I apologize. That's the second time, and it won't happen again. Because it really is. It requires a certain level of. You have to be thoughtful if you want to be an ally. Thoughtfulness goes hand in hand with allyship. And I know there's a lot going on in the chat, and I apologize. I'm not a good multitasker. There will be time for me to address that, and thankfully Shanta is going to help me figure that out at the end so I can get to some of the comments and questions. Okay, so an apology, period. Very important in being an ally. So tips for apologies at work. Here's a nice graphic. Choose the apology method: in person, email. Sometimes an email might be easier. I understand. Apologize immediately or as soon as possible. It really, that really is important. I think the longer you let it sit, it may not be to the best. Often it feels like it's come a little bit too late for it to be sincere. So I do encourage you, as soon as you can and feel comfortable doing it. Avoid giving excuses, and that's but I'm sorry, but that at all costs if possible. Take responsibility for your actions. I did it, yeah, this was mine. Don't let somebody else take the heat for it. That is truly not a good ally. Explain how you will fix things, right? Here's my plan, especially if it's something that really requires more of a drawn out situation. I would definitely write something out. And follow through with the remedy. Really, really stick to it. Oh my goodness. I think that's really important for you to be able to make it true. Wouldn't be a webinar without a little coughing going on, right? Okay, so then how do you continue to learn, right? It just seems, and I apologize for the busyness here, but one thing you can do just on your own, and I'm at the library, so books, right? And there's just amazing things out there. This is a graphic of banned books, the books that have been banned most recently. But there's fiction and nonfiction. There are amazing authors, and I was going to provide you a list, but truly, 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 go to your favorite library, and you can type in equity, you can type in diversity, you can type in inclusion, you can any of these, and most would generate a list of books that are being recommended. Most of the booksellers have them. The American Library Association has their own list as well. So books, and that's something that you could do on your own time and really continue to learn how best to be an ally. Articles, great articles, magazines, essays that are being written on these topics of today. Academic research that is now being done more and more. I think that this is, and I love the academic research because you get good data. Unfortunately, it's not in real time often. By the time it's published, the data is a little bit older, but still very important for us to have that academic research. So if you're in academia, please, thank you for doing that work. A podcast, radio, right? An excellent way for you to learn. And what's really great about these is that you can be active as you're learning. You can be on the walk or run, whatever it is, what you enjoy doing most, but you can still carve out a half hour, 20 minutes to listen to a podcast or a radio show that you like to follow. And I encourage you to follow the other side as well on occasion. It's hard to understand the other side unless you take time to listen to the other side. There are great movies and shows, documentaries that are out there right now that tackle these tough situations and actually model, I believe, really good allyship. And I really encourage you to seek those out and to share them with your friends. We also have incredible YouTube where we have TED Talks that you can access that are very, very current and important for you to look at. And many they're just online and they're free. So they're really, in fact, I think everything I have mentioned, with the exception of maybe magazines that you may have to buy, or some movies if you want to see them on the big screen, but otherwise, most of these things you can access freely. You can attend events and conferences as well. And some are here local. We have the forum that occurs every spring here in the Twin Cities. I believe it's in the spring. And then there are national forums as well. Courageous Conversations is one that has been doing work from K to 12 and has expanded into higher ed now. NCORE, the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity, another wonderful conference. If you're in HR, there's SHRM that does an inclusion conference as well. I mean, you could look for these and they're amazing. And you do not have to be a member to attend. And the good thing is that many are still, although many are going back to in-person, some are still maintaining a virtual portion of the conference. So I think that's fantastic because it's one, less costly. And secondly, it is you don't have to travel, right? You can do it from home. So highly recommend that. Something closer to home, committees. There's so many committees. I work closely with two amazing committees here at the library. It's the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Leadership Committee that we have here that just is doing fantastic work here for us at libraries. And the other is our LASC, which is Accessibility Steering Committee, our library's Accessibility Steering Committee. Again, incredible work that both of these committees are doing here for us at the libraries at the University of Minnesota. So there are many committees that you can join where you will have an opportunity to do your work and to have an opportunity to display yourself as an ally. Be an activist. And there's one of my greatest heroes, Dolores Huerta, and she's the original of Si Se Puede. Yes, we can, right? Yes, you can. So important for us to go ahead and take the leap if you want to. Many recently have decided that that is the best way that they can do, and that they're activists and they're out there and they attend rallies and lend their whole being to the cause that they feel is where they want to be a strong ally. So many, many, many opportunities for you to truly unleash that power of allyship. Now, you will encounter resistance. And I think it's important for you to understand that there is resistance, and it's an opportunity for us to really understand ourselves and how it is that we can have that conversation with resistance. The why and the kind of resistance. So there's psychological threats, and all of this you'll find in the resources. There's the status threat. And this comes from the thought that if individuals from historically marginalized groups make gains, then members of the majority group will experience losses, right? And this is all based on the belief that there's only an 8-inch pie. There's only this much to go around. So if we begin to give all these chances and opportunities to people that have been left out before, then the people who have been taking advantage and having this pie will no longer be able to have it. Now, I want to challenge that, because I know that during Thanksgiving, Lunds and Byerly's and Cubs and all the grocery stores make these tremendously huge 12-inch pies, which go to show you that it's just, we have to look at things differently. There is no finite amount of opportunity. And that's really important for us to be able to have that discussion with people. Okay, so that's the status threat. Oh my gosh, there's only so much to go around. The merit threat. This one is, if there is inequity, bias, racism, and discrimination, then it's not because of my hard work, right? That I have achieved. It negates my accomplishments. So this threat on my merit, and that's hard for someone to take, right? So the first, that things will be taken away. The second, that I really haven't worked as hard as I know I worked. And then the last threat, the moral threat. At our core, we see ourselves as moral and good people. The majority of us. If this work is necessary, and we have to do this work, and we have to be allies, and we have to try to bring people on board, does it mean then that we're not moral and good people? And that's hard to gulp sometimes, right? So there's the status threat, the merit threat, and the moral threat. So now, what do we do with these? So how do we defend, right? So, and I apologize, this is extremely wordy, but the majority group members feel compelled to defend the status quo, right? This is what they need to do. There is no need for these efforts. Everything is fine. Let's just leave things as they are. And our response has to be that we have to highlight that really there's a win-win for the support of DEIA efforts and initiatives. That pie, remember, can be 10 inches, it can be 12 inches. And as allies, we're the ones that have to help people realize that. We can deny the resistance, right? The majority group members deny the existence of any inequities, bias, racism, etc. Status and merit threats are present here, right? Because they're denying this work. And our response, highlight once again that win-win scenario, same as we just mentioned, but also the self-affirmation of what is working and what they do right, and why this work is important, right? No, really, this is important work that we're all in here together doing. Everyone is better when we're all better. And our last one, distance. The majority group here agrees, yes, bias and inequities exist, but I'm not biased. And I have not benefited from any of these inequities. Merit and moral threat are present here for this individual. And our response is self-affirmation is useful. No, you're right. You have worked hard. No one is saying you haven't worked hard, right? And reframe DEIA for work for them to connect the universal ideals, such as equity and equality, right? As equality and not as an obligation. This isn't an obligation, right? We just have to remember that we are all better when we are all better. Okay, and we're getting here close to the end, so we'll have time for some questions and comments. I just want to take us from Obama to where we are now. No affirmative action. And it's like, oh my goodness, right? So many things, but I just want to highlight just a few from 2008 to 2012 when he was president. And we thought, okay, that meant racial bias was over. Look what we did, right? This was a real coming together, and we thought, okay, it's over. Yet, within months, they arrested Henry Louis Gates Jr., the historian from Finding Your Roots, for trying to enter his own home. God, he locked himself out and he was arrested. Then there was death of Trayvon Martin, death of Michael Brown, Christian Cooper, the birder confronted by Amy Cooper, no relation, walking her dog. Philando Castillo, closer to home here, who did everything right as per the talk, right? That African-American men and men of color, and yet he was killed. Breonna Taylor killed in her own home, the murder of George Floyd. And most recently, Lansing, Michigan, a 12-year-old boy handcuffed for mistaken identity while he was taking out his trash, with his father there pleading with the police. Just think of what would happen had this young boy tried to run home. So we have a lot of work to do. And we need allies. We come to work, whether in person or virtually, with our whole selves. Each day brings a new challenge. But as the world is going on around us and we show up for work, all of these things affect us. They affect us all differently. So we need allies to be there when someone is misgendered, to be there when someone needs assistance because of an accessibility issue, to be there when someone seems off. Why? Right? Because I mean, look at the world. Be there when someone says that they are tired, not just because of work. Be there when things happen in that world that we cannot control. And simply, we have to be there for each other. That is an ally. So with that, thank you, gracias. I really appreciate you all being here. And I'm going to pass it back to Shanta. Shanta, thank you so much. I'll go to the next.
Yes, thank you so much, Patricia, for
Oh,
presenting on this very, yes, this very valuable topic. So we'll move now on to our questions. We have a few here. I apologize in advance if I don't get to everyone's question. So the first one we'll start with is, I'd love to hear more about what you said about I'd love to hear more about what you said about channeling learning action. I'm struggling to take the next step and how to inspire others to take action as well.
Oh, it is hard. I will recognize that first and foremost. It is hard. And I think that one of the things is that you have to build your own confidence. And that's where the learning part comes. You really have to learn our true history of our nation. It's a nation, yes, it's a great nation. It's a great nation. But it's a nation that was built on the premise of the annihilation of a race, our Native Americans, the enslavement of a race, our African Americans, who did not ask to come. And then the creation of a permanent class that will always be there for us to work in an invisible way. And those are the immigrants that continue to come into this nation because they are coming here willingly, but they are kept in the shadows. So when you build a nation on these premises, it's really hard, but yet we weren't taught that. So the first thing I would do is learn your history, truly learn our history here, because if you're part of this great nation, this is our history, we own it. And it's like spilled milk that has gone under the refrigerator. I don't care who spilled it, but someone's got to help me move the refrigerator to clean the milk, okay? So that's what we have to do. So that would be step one, build your confidence.
Awesome. Thank you. The next question we have is, can you offer any advice on the situation where one does not want to share personal pronouns?
Yes. And, you know, we cannot force people to do it. I think the best thing you could do is simply model, right? And that if you could do it for yourself and model it and do it with confidence, and hopefully you will surround yourself with people that will feel that same confidence and say, oh, I can do that as well. Now, if someone is challenging you about that, often it's not best to challenge individuals that you can tell want to debate. I would provide them, say, I'm going to send you some information and then let's have a coffee after you've read some of it. Give them some time to do a little bit of learning on their own and then encounter that conversation. That's when things go wrong often. So just realize that sometimes it's not the best time now. but it will be later.
Yeah, that patience, right?
Exactly, Santa, you know.
Yes. Okay, and our next question, you might have this on your resources page that you mentioned, but one listener comments, thank you for talking about the tie between home ownership and public education. I love to get involved with reforms on this issue. Can you recommend resources?
Yes, here at the library, we're doing some great work with a group that came to us, and they're looking at the deeds, and how the deeds, what they said, that you could not sell the home to a person, a Black person, a Jewish person, and they would name, it's just incredible. So I would highly recommend for you to go to our website and to look for it. Yeah, that's one. Another thing that you can do is also to reach out to different organizations. Southern Poverty Law is an excellent organization. It is nationwide, and they offer opportunities for you to get involved as well. Mhm.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, so I think we'll just move on to our last slide here. Thank you again so much, Patricia, for your useful information and tools.
Yes.
As I mentioned earlier, we will send a link to the webinar recording within a week of today's webinar. If you enjoyed this webinar and want to dive deeper into this topic, there is a list of upcoming courses. The second allyship course, Creating an Inclusive Workplace, is taught by Patricia. So if you're interested, please feel free to enroll. And our college's contact information will also be on this slide. If you are a University of Minnesota employee, this applies to you. There's information on how you can apply for the well-being points for viewing this webinar. All right,
Mhm.
everyone, you all have a wonderful rest of your afternoon, and thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Patricia.
Yes, thank you all for being here. I really appreciate, and just looking at comments, so I appreciate comments as well.